Well,
Recording.
you
Got it.
always know when it's recording now, right?
That's right. You always know. Anyway, hi everybody. All of our Career Labbies. Hi. I hope that your Career Lab journey is going well so far. Just kind of as a recap, what you should be doing for Career Lab right now is submitting your LinkedIn profiles to the mentors you're paired up with in that GitHub repo so that they can start giving you feedback on that. You also should be scheduling your mock interviews with your technical mock interviewer and your job fit mock interviewer for next week. So those are kind of action items right now. And then this weekend, we'll start kicking off the interview portion of Career Lab, where on Sunday, we'll have a session on the intro to the take-home assignment. So you'll learn all about how you need to do the take-home assignment. And you will also be learning about how to rock the technical interview, which in my opinion is the most intimidating part of interviewing. So try to come to those sessions if you can. They'll be recorded if they don't fit into your schedule. And we'll start kicking off interview things next week. But today we have one of my favorite Career Lab sessions, navigating finances during a career change, with our friend Luke, who's a certified financial planner and founder of a financial planning company called Level Up. And oh, do you have like Power Texas Power Up?
Yeah. So Power Up Tax Planning, which I started, that's smaller. It just helps a lot of my financial planning clients that I do the whole thing for them. And it's something they just kept asking me. And the first couple of years, I was like, no, you should work with someone else, or you can do TurboTax. And like they were messing up. So I had to start a tax one just to kind of complete that whole circle there for them.
You do need me. Okay, so here's another company. Anyway, so Luke's here to teach us about how to navigate these finances during a career change. So I will pass it over to you, Luke.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, everyone. And Stacy and Andrew, thanks for inviting me back. This is the second time I'm presenting. I know this is going to be recorded, probably thrown online. So anyone that's kind of running through this maybe a second time, my wording might change. Most of the slides are the same, but I did add in some kind of new wrinkles and things to tackle. And I think we'll get a lot more of value too, even out of the chat, the questions and answers that you bring to me throughout the conversation. And Andrew, I think last time I asked you, and I think you were awesome at doing it, where you were catching things in the chat, so I didn't have to monitor it as much. And so you guys can be funny, chat, goof around as much as possible. I'll try not to get distracted by it. And then when there's a real question in there, Andrew will let me know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, one thing I'm just putting in the chat right now is that we have people from a couple different countries on the call. So people in South America, people in Canada. And I know like some of the tax stuff is probably different there, but a lot of the principles you're going to cover, from what I remember last time, should apply, right?
Yeah, the core finance is just like a lot of things, just like being healthy. Like there's the basics, some of the extra things, like if I dive into taxes with anyone, dive into 401k plans, those might look a little different. They might work a little bit different for you, but at the core, strong financial habits are going to be good. Strong basic financial planning concepts are always going to be great to get going. And clearly this is going to be a 30, 45, maybe an hour long session at the most. And so you're not going to get everything you need, but if you kind of get inspired to do some additional research, I'm in the Discord channel, so you guys can reach out to me there. You can connect with me, and at the end you'll see various ways you can kind of choose to hunt me down. And I also create a ton of other content that's out there that a lot of times you might feel like, oh, I feel bad asking my question. I've tried to create a ton of content that for those frequently asked questions, so it might not be too much of my time at all. I might be able to just send you a link and then ask you to reach out if you have additional questions beyond that. Perfect. So with that, we'll get started. And I think the coolest thing about being here today with you all is that probably about a third of my clients are either early career or in that career transition. And there's a huge opportunity here for you, whether you've already made that change or that change is going to be here in the next couple months, where life is going to change very dramatically. And you can either make some really good decisions right out the gate and feel really strong. And Stacey was talking about financial confidence. I'm really, really big on financial confidence. I think it's one of the most important things of believing that you can and that you should be successful, whether it's financially or in your career. So it's very important. And yeah, hopefully we'll tackle a lot of these core concepts that you'll be able to bring with you and be able to continue building upon from here. And building upon things kind of fits in with Level Up Financial Planning. Because basically everything that you gain and learn career-wise, financial-wise, you're not going to forget that unless all of a sudden you have Alzheimer's or something, which typically is not going to happen to most people until later on in life anyways. And so you constantly are going to be building, learning, exploring new things, and you only move up from here. It's not like you're going to forget how to save or forget how some of these things work. Stacey already did a great job kind of talking about my background with financial planning, just other stuff. I'm in Colorado, which is in the USA, and I have 4 children, 4 and under, and that's been pretty intense. We have 1 dog too, and then I create the different forms of content. So if you're ever looking for something, you can always kind of search my sites and resources there. And tonight we'll talk about how to be financially successful, how to go from surviving to thriving, where with these career changes, sometimes it's a lateral move in terms of income, but a lot of times it's not. It's like, hey, my income's going to double, if not in that first kind of spot in the next couple of years. That's what I've seen from my clients that have made these transitions where double, triple, and it doesn't really take too long. And the hardest part, as I'm sure most of you are aware, is just getting that first opportunity so you can start building experience. So you can actually say, hey, I actually did something, and here's a team manager that can kind of support that I was an asset to the team. We'll also talk about this or that, which is really my frequently asked questions. So we'll talk about things that I get 10 times a day. And so we'll be able to tackle those. And then there's obviously, just like anything, there's things to be aware of. Make sure that you don't kind of step in the wrong area without being aware of some of that stuff. And then just general Q&A if you have additional questions that we don't tackle. As a financial planning professional, and there's all different forms of financial people out there, but I'm required to share this with you where it says, hey, this is not specific advice. This is going to give you more knowledge-based, more educational. Obviously, if you end up working with a financial planner directly, hopefully they'll find out enough about you to be able to give you specific recommendations. A lot of these things are going to be kind of core concepts, so definitely things you can build upon from here. And before we dive into all of that, I think it's important to talk about just the impact of money on happiness. And there is some correlation. Like, you can definitely go from poverty levels and increase your income, and that will make a huge difference in your life. Once you get close to 6 figures, really your happiness doesn't really go up that much higher. You can see it kind of starts to plateau. And the reason for that is you're already doing everything you need to do. You're safe, you're healthy, hopefully, and you're kind of well into your career at that point. And what happens is, as that income grows, your happiness isn't growing the same amount that it used to early in your career. And there's a few ways that kind of research and studies have shown where you can actually increase that bump of happiness a little bit more as your income grows. That's by giving to others. This is the Christmas holiday type season. So I think people are more giving around this times, and you feel good when you're doing stuff to help people. I'm sure that the mentors in the group of Collab Lab feel really good about giving to other people. And that's not because they're getting income or any additional benefit from that. So that's ways that you can increase happiness because you feel stable enough. You're not having to hustle to grind and earn every single dollar. You can use your time for better things that improve your happiness in that form or fashion. So I think that's important. And it's definitely not a cure for things you can see like Jeff Bezos. I think even Bill Gates recently, like all these people had relationships and they get divorced. They're multimillionaires. So money isn't going to solve some of those things that you think that it might. And so it's just important to be aware of, because it is very easy to get distracted, especially if you're coming from not having money. And yeah, 30,000 to 60,000, definitely a big deal. 80,000 to 90,000, not as much. And so that's, I think, important to know is you don't need to make 6 figures in order to be successful. Actually, a lot of my younger clients who are like, oh, I'm making 60 or 70,000, but they're very intentional about what matters to them and what they care about. And they're doing better than some of my clients that are making $300,000 in terms of on track for the goals, definitely going to knock everything out of the park that they want to do and to be considering themselves successful. So I think that's very important to be aware of is, yeah, the money can help do things, but if those things don't actually matter, well, you might not need to stress yourself out, hustle yourself to the bone to try to make 200,000 if that additional 100,000 that you're kind of grinding yourself away at isn't actually going to meaningfully change your life or other people around you. The biggest thing is kind of finding those good habits, getting those established early. The hardest thing to do is to spend $100,000, live life lavishly, not really do some of the right things, put things in the savings accounts in case of emergency. Don't save up for retirement when there could be a downsizing at your work, or just because you're older, which tends to happen in tech probably more than any other places I've seen, where they'll be like, you know what, you're making a lot of money. We're going to have to push you out the door and bring in some younger people that don't command as high of a salary. So establishing these habits early on, not relying on all of your income, is going to be very critical to make sure that if something does happen, that you're going to be able to absorb and kind of ride out some of those situations. And it's one thing that's important to know there too, is you can do something really good for all year long. Let's say you saved $1,000 a month all year long, and then something happened and you went crazy and you spent 25,000 on just random stuff. You went on a crazy vacation that wasn't in your goals. It doesn't align with some of the other things that you have coming up, like maybe purchasing a house, getting married, funding your kids' college, these big important things that might be more meaningful to you than one kind of big trip. And maybe you weren't saving for that specifically. Maybe you were saving for these other things. But yeah, one big misstep could definitely derail a whole year long of good habits. And I've seen people even do really well for the first 15, 20 years of their career, and then they kind of go nuts or do something very wrong, and they really impact their ability to retire on schedule. And if you think about just any success that you've ever had in life, financial success is not that much different, other than it does take more of a long-term approach. You have to not expect to be a millionaire just from getting that first tech job, working that first year in tech. And so if you've thought about any of the things that you've achieved, you probably had to break those things down there. It probably took a while for you to get to where you wanted to. Running a marathon is a good example, because it's not something you just wake up, decide to do if you're not typically in the range and that type of mindset to be doing those things normally. And so what you have to do is you have to train. You probably start out running 1 mile or run around your block, and you have these different milestones, and you get to feel that success. You get to feel gratified by that as you're making progress towards those goals. And financial success is very much like those things. And if you could achieve anything, whether it's landing that first tech job, graduating boot camp, graduating college, graduating high school, like all these things are things that you've achieved in the past, most likely. And it's not all that different. It's just kind of focusing on what's important to you and getting serious about how you want to achieve those. So this is going to be like a quick and dirty way to build out a plan for yourself. So got to be confident. You got to believe and believe that you're going to be successful and be capable of having success. You might not know what that's going to look like or how you're going to get there, but I think that's where these next kind of steps fall in. But belief in anything is just 50% of the battle half the time, because if you don't believe that, if you're going to talk bad about yourself or negatively about yourself about these types of things, you're going to self-sabotage yourself. You might do good for 12 months and then you might just blow it up and go gambling one weekend or something destructible. And I see it not so much with my clients, but there's definitely a couple of them where I'll have conversations like, whoa, like we made so much progress. What's going on here? And so part of that is kind of self-sabotage, like, oh, I don't deserve this. That happens in tech, honestly, with some of the money that you might be making in your career is like, holy smokes, I'm making 100,000. Like, do I deserve to be making that much? I feel like such a fraud. And so sometimes you can self-sabotage yourself that way. For me, I ended up starting a business when I felt like, oh man, I'm making too much money and it's too easy. Let me try to make stuff harder for myself and provide more value. And so that was kind of my interesting way of just feeling like I didn't deserve what I was doing right there. And it was actually a good thing for me as far as aligning my business more with what my values and goals are. And that's important. So step number two, Stacy mentioned this earlier. I don't know if anyone was just on the call just yet, but identify those goals and the things that are going to be important for you, because those are going to be the things that actually get you to take action. Everyone knows that you should eat healthy, exercise, but if there's not a more meaningful reason for you to do it, just knowing those things aren't going to move the needle. It's not going to get you to put down the donut. It's not going to get you to put on your running shoes or whatever it is. So compare that to financial planning and just kind of financial management. It feels good and it's easy to just spend money with Amazon, everything online, everything showing up the next day. It's pretty different than how things even were like 10 or 20 years ago. So being financially successful now is a little bit harder just with all the distractions and all the more easier ways to spend money. So if you identify those goals, it'll be easier to be like, oh, funding kids' college versus going and doing whatever it is you can do. You can go out to bars and spend a lot of money that way, or you can split the difference and buy alcohol, make stuff at home for yourself and save money, still get kind of the benefits of what you're kind of hoping to achieve, and still be more on track for those other goals that are more meaningful to you. Once you know what those goals are, then you kind of look at your resources, which are going to be any of those assets that you've accumulated, whether it's 401ks, checking accounts, savings accounts, stock options, and also your income. Your income is very much a resource, and you get to decide. That's one of the nice things about making an income is you could decide for most things how you want to spend it. So yes, you have to spend for rent or a mortgage, but you get to choose where you want that to be. And there's other things like that too, like you have to eat, but you get to kind of pick and choose there. Then as your tech and your income is in excess of what you need just for those kind of basic necessities, then it really is your choice how you want to choose to align those. You can align them with your goals. You can not have goals and just kind of be willy-nilly with things, and you might not make them progress. You might not feel as financially confident that you're going to achieve some of the things that you hear other people talk about, and maybe it's because you just don't have those goals just yet. So that's why having the goals makes a lot of sense to get that earlier on in the process. Once you have those things, you can either use like an Excel spreadsheet. There's a lot of online resources too, where you can see, am I on track? If you know you need $2 million and you have $50, might not necessarily be on track, but the good thing is most of you are in a career change. It's not because you're about to retire next year. And so you do have time. There's going to be opportunities. You might have to make some trade-offs and decisions that are different from other people that maybe started at 22, 23 and started out with a very strong kind of income right out of the gates. But if just like anything, like we mentioned, anything that you've achieved, there's people that have achieved the same thing that maybe had better resources, had easier way there, easier path, less obstacles, but you were able to attain the same type of success that they had. And you can do most of those things financially as well, even if you're starting later behind. It just means you have to do it differently. You have to be more intentional. You have to be a little bit more efficient and careful with how you're going to do that. And then once you know those things, if you're on track, that's great. That surprisingly, I'd say maybe about 20% of my clients actually come to me because they think they might be on track, or they don't know if they're on track. And we look at it, it's like, oh yeah, you're actually doing really great. And they're like so happy and grateful that they just know now. And that was something that was kind of surprising to me when I started my company. I just thought like, oh, everyone I was going to be helping was just needed like a ton of help, and I needed to do a lot of education and coaching and guiding. But just having clarity on where you stand is huge. If you're not on track, well, now you know, and now you can start making those decisions, and you can start to build out that plan of attack. Well, what do I need to do to start getting the ball rolling? Do I need to save? I mentioned it again before we started this conversation that I've had clients that weren't on track. They wanted, for this specific example, they were going to be getting married and they wanted to spend 20,000, and they were all on board with those things. But what they weren't on board about, because they didn't talk about all the details of their goals, is when that wedding was going to happen. So the guy's side of the equation, he was thinking like 3 years out. We had 3 years to save for this goal. And when he mentioned that, I saw her face like get all red, and I could see she was flustered. And we were talking in Zoom like this. So he saw her face in the reflection back, and he's like, oh, wait, why? When do you think? And she's like, oh, next year at the latest. You're like, well, saving 20,000 over 3 years versus saving it over 12 months is going to be a big difference. And but the nice thing is now that you know, you're able to start kind of plotting the course and be like, well, we're not going to be maxing out retirement accounts if this other goal is more important and is kind of be front running. So once you have these things laid out, you can start prioritizing goals based on, well, how soon are they going to come, and then how important and meaningful they are. Sometimes people scratch goals that are less meaningful, like maybe we're not going to go on vacation now because we want to go on a honeymoon, and so it's more meaningful at that point in time. So just having these plans, this plan laid out there, you can then start to shift the board around. It's your game. You get to decide what winning looks like. And so that's one of the fun things of having that plan is once you know, then you can start moving things around and making it work for you. Any major questions kind of coming through the chat?
We're actually using this thing called Dory to track questions. So there's a few questions in there. So when we get to the Q&A,
okay,
we'll be able to.
Perfect. Sounds good to me. So this is one of the sides that I added. So just kind of look at this on the left side versus the right side. This is really the difference between being successful versus just struggling financially. And the income's the same on both sides. So just imagine like whether it's $100,000 even, it's the same on both sides, but one of them's going to be successful, which is going to be the left side when you're looking at it, and the right side is going to be the one that's struggling. And so what's the difference between those kind of layouts? Oh, see you, Stacey. I saw you taking off there. So as you guys are looking through that, savings, yep. So that's and right now in your situation, in many of your situations, if it really is you're changing careers due to the sizable income, the kind of more meaningful income that you might be able to generate and provide for yourself and family potentially, like that's savings isn't always a high priority when you're not making enough income to have excess kind of things going on. But yeah, an example like this where you're in your tech career, you're probably making 60, 70,000, possibly on entry level. But then a couple of years in, you might be near that 100,000, depending on where you're located. I know we have people, this is US dollars. So there's people denominated in other resources throughout, but yeah, try to boil this down to yours. So yeah, the big difference is on the left side, they're being intentional. These savings are going towards goals that are important to them. And you don't see the savings on the right side. It's like, hey, let me just have fun. Let me do what I want. I'm working hard. I should enjoy it. I definitely agree. But when you're making tech income, tech salaries, usually there's sufficient to actually do things that are going to be more long-term and meaningful. And that's where the savings comes in. Savings also comes in just as far as like protection and absorbing some crazy events that could occur. And then another difference too, it's kind of a subtle difference, but they distinguish between needs versus wants. So they understand like, hey, this is what I know I need on a monthly basis. And then there's fun stuff that I want to. And the nice thing is when it's broken out this way, it's easier to prioritize when you kind of lay it out. If you just think that everything that you could spend money on is both a need and a want, and you don't really distinguish between those things, it's really easy to just feel that a want is a need basically. And that's what happens when people are struggling financially. Like, hey, I want to save money, but I can't find money to save. Usually there's things, and I never want to tell someone what categories they should be spending money on unless they ask me like, hey, where am I way off with these things? But them just doing a self-assessment. Well, what do you need? What's kind of that next level priority that's like, oh, it'd be nice to have. And then there's other things that's like, oh, well, if I can't do some of these other things that are important, like travel or buy a house eventually, or fund a family, to take care of a family and things like that. Well, if I can't do those things, then these wants aren't going to be helpful to me anyway. So maybe I can shelf some of these wants until the future. And that's one thing I've seen people make huge errors on early in their careers is, hey, you get that first big job and all of a sudden you go out and buy a Corvette or just buy something that is so large of an expense that it really just kind of eats up everything that you just kind of benefited from. So a raise ended up meaning a new car. It doesn't really mean that your life changed in any way, because you just replace that income increase with a whole car basically. And not to say that that's wrong, but a lot of times people do that and then like, oh man, now I can't buy the house. Well, a house is usually an appreciating asset and a car is a depreciation asset. And that's one of the things I see people do, like when they get those first big paychecks, is they think that the more exotic fun thing is the car, but they could definitely probably do the car, but if they prioritize the house first and let the house be an increase in asset, sometimes just moving these things around, you can do a lot of the things that you're going to want to do, but front loading it all in the same year, it's not going to be as impactful. And you'll also put more strain on your finances and really not be able to get ahead. If you structure these things out more, it's like, I can do this year, I can do this next year, I can do this the following year. As your income goes up, you're actually gonna be able to do everything that you want to do and be successful, rather than front load stuff and then be super stressed out, not really to be able to enjoy the life you're creating for yourself, because you're just putting a lot of strain on your new resources. So I think that's important. That's some of the stuff I just see all the times when people just get out on the wrong foot. And like I said, right now, if your income isn't where you're planning it to be as you break into tech, it might look like this, not because of you not having goals, not being able to prioritize savings. It's just this income isn't large enough right now. And that's why you're going through this process. Changing careers is not easy. I definitely know that. So you're investing in yourself. You're making this huge change and investing in yourself and betting on yourself to make your situation be this side where, well, now you do have sizable income and now there is savings. And now you can really start to think like, oh, wants and needs and all those important fun things. So once you kind of have an outline of the plan, once you kind of realize that, yep, you probably should be saving, you can probably start paying down debt faster. Like that's the name of the game when most people make this change. And if you don't think about some of these things, then what happens is you just find ways to spend it off. You go from making 50,000 to 100,000 and you're not intentional. You don't think about your goals. You don't think about savings and doing some of those things to catch up. You'll find a way to spend $100,000 really easily because a good portion of that's going to be taxed. And I think there's taxes all over the world. So the tax rates might be different. It might look a little bit different, but most places will tax you in some form or fashion. And so 100,000, you can definitely find ways to spend it before you even start thinking about savings, if you don't prioritize some of the goals and things that are important to you. And so with this transition, as you're making this big leap, even if there's not a huge income change initially, these are things that you want to have on your horizon, where that next big pay increase, that next job title, where things really do change, you can start thinking about how to prioritize kind of getting ahead and catching up, rather than, well, how can I find ways to spend all this money? And I definitely think you should do both, right? You've worked hard, you've made this huge transition. You should find ways to spend a portion and be like, treat yourself for making these big changes and betting on yourself. But these things are things that you'll thank yourself for in the future. You cannot even imagine how often I hear, and this is even for people that are just not clients, people will be like, oh, I love what you're doing, because when I did this and I started building that financial confidence, I just wanted to save more. Like I felt so good about it. Even when I didn't think I could initially, I started realizing that it was a lot easier to save. And so I found even more ways to save. And it's good to see your balances go up, whether it's your 401k, savings accounts, and you start to become proud of it, more proud than a car sitting outside, probably more proud than what the house looks like or what the interior of the house looks like. It's pretty interesting, some of the kind of emotional positive feedback that comes in as you're making progress towards these goals and as you're kind of building up. Wealth is basically what it's going to feel like. And there's different ways you can do it. You can start by kind of replenishing savings, building up emergency savings. If you have high interest debt, it's definitely important to start prioritizing paying that down. No one should have a goal of paying in any double digit interest. So if you have 10% or higher interest rates, definitely make a priority to start paying some of that down. retirement accounts are a great opportunity if your employer offers employer matching, 401k matching, where they put money in there for you for free. Protection, that's life insurance. I just had a conversation on Twitter about this with someone, but if you want to provide generational wealth, you don't have to wait until 20 or 30 years from now to kind of guarantee that. You can get a very cheap term life insurance policy, get $1 million of protection. And so even if you're day one walking into your tech career, you're not going to be a millionaire overnight, but you can put life insurance in place that if something happened to you tomorrow, before you actually earned throughout the next 10, 15, 20 years, your life insurance will provide that benefit for you. And then if you are still around 20 years from now, well, if you're doing the right things, you will accumulate $1 million, possibly more by the time that next 15, 20 years roll around. And then, yeah, that's inheritable assets to the next generation, if that's what's important to you. Paying taxes, it's a painful thing, but it's also a good thing. Most people only really pay taxes once you're high earners. And so the more taxes you pay, it means because you're earning more dollars. And if you make $100, and even if you're in like one of the higher tax brackets of 32%, if you make $100, well, you still get to keep $68 of that, even though you pay $32 to the government. So more money, even though taxes are more, you're still benefiting by getting more money net to you for that. So this is kind of the fun, frequently asked questions. I call it this or that, and we'll tackle some of these things. And this might be some of the questions that you've had come in. So I just mentioned term life insurance, but this is a question I get all the time, primarily because there's a lot of salespeople out there who will try to sell you whole life insurance if you ask for life insurance, and they won't even let you know this term life insurance exists. Term life insurance, most of the time, is my recommendation because it's way more affordable, and term life insurance is specified to a certain agreement timeframe. So you can say, I want a 15-year term life policy for $1 million. That means that you guarantee your beneficiaries will get those funds if something happens to you during that 15-year time period. And you pay a very small amount to kind of have that in place. The goal and idea behind that is over that 15 years, you're going to be working, you're going to be building up your 401k. You might purchase a house and build up equity in the house. You're going to have a net worth above that $1 million policy in about 15 to 20 years. And so if something happened to you in 20 years, even though your term life insurance disappeared, well, your net worth is now 1.5 million or 2 million. So your beneficiaries can be just fine. What whole life insurance does is they want you to pay forever. You're always going to have this coverage. And because of that protection, they know that you're going to die eventually. So the insurance is way more expensive. It can be pretty brutal as far as how costly it is. And what happens a lot of times, especially if you buy this before you're in tech, is you might end up not being able to afford all the life insurance your family needs because the agent's trying to sell you something that's more expensive than what needs to be. And since you can only afford X amount, you're maybe instead of $1 million of coverage, you might only be able to afford 150,000 because of where the price is. And so you might be able to get the same benefit or you might be able to get a lot larger benefit for term life insurance for the same dollar amount that you're paying for this, but it might be tenfold difference. So that's important to be aware of. Rare instances where whole life is highly recommended is if you have a child or someone that relies on you, that you know that if something happens to you, they're going to need round the clock care, support, some type of expense for someone to take care of someone else forever, basically, and you're not going to be around forever. So that's when whole life would make sense in that kind of situation. And there's a couple of other ones too, but usually that's one I run into the most. So with this new money that you have coming at you, should you apply it towards debt repayment or apply it to 401k contributions? So if you have an employer match 401k contributions, you want to get up to that. Sometimes it's only 3%. So if you put in 3% of your income, your employer might match and give you free 3%. So I always recommend doing that because that's 100% return on the money that you put in. On the debt repayment side, if you have those high interest rates, like I said, double-digit interest rates, then anything above what your employer requires you in order to get the match, then you can start focusing on the debt repayment. If you have a 22% credit card interest rate and you're paying 22% on your balance there, well, everything that you pay down is going to save you 22%. So if you have $1,000 balance, you're going to save $220 that year by paying $1,000 additional towards that balance. So it's not quite the 100% return that you get on the 401k side for the employer match, but the 22% return from paying down that debt faster is definitely huge. And if any of you have ever known someone or you yourself have been in credit card debt, it's definitely very hard to climb out of with high interest rates. So you got to really focus on those things. So rent or buy, this is very popular, especially with all the craziness in home buying in markets, at least in the United States. Everywhere in the United States, I haven't heard anywhere where it's more affordable now than it was in previous years to buy in the United States. And so what happens is a lot of times it makes sense to buy, but when it doesn't make sense to buy is if you're relocating somewhere temporarily, if you're relocating somewhere and you're not totally sold that you're going to be there long-term, like more than 2 or 3 years. And the reason for that is because even though the market's hot right now, I actually had this with one of my clients that moved here to Colorado. They moved here, realized that they don't have the family support for their family that they're growing. And the job isn't exactly what they thought. They're getting burnt out. So they're actually going to move back to Kansas from Colorado. And so even though they bought, luckily right now that the market still is in good shape, but why you want to typically have that long-term horizon for making a purchase of a home is in short segments of time, it's possible that the housing market could slow down and then no one wants to buy your house. And so that's the worst thing that could happen is, well, you're paying for a mortgage here, you have to go somewhere else and either get another mortgage or rent and carry two of those expenses at once because you just can't sell your house fast enough. And if things get bad enough, this doesn't happen too often, but if you're really in a pinch and you really need to unload the house, well, then you need to drop the value and someone will buy it eventually once it hits a low enough price, if it's a big enough discount. And so that's really where the tricky thing is. If you're gonna buy and you plan to move in 3 months or 6 months or a year, there's also real estate commissions and costs to buying and selling a home. So typically you might end up losing money if you leave in a year. And then also there's just that liquidity issue. You can't just, it's not like a stock where you say, oh, I'm selling this today and I'll be in a new house in an hour or in a minute. It takes time. Real estate transactions usually take at least 1 month on the fast end and usually up to 3 months. So definitely want to be considering more of a long-term situation for a buy. Then a rent is a good thing to test out an area, or if you're not totally sold that's where you're going to be long-term or comfortable being tied down to is another reason to rent. There's also miscellaneous home expenses that could come up. Like all of a sudden you have to be the one that replaces the heater or the washer machine and things like that. So those things in the grand scheme end up being pretty minimal due to what the value of a home can do as far as growing in value. But for this one, time versus money. So if your income has been lower and you haven't necessarily had the luxury to buy yourself more time by outsourcing services like mowing the lawn, shoveling the snow, just things that would take you time and would be an inconvenience, but and really you have money and you're able to kind of throw at those things. So this is very much personal preferences more than anything, but as you get older, as you have more income, that's really where you can start to get a little bit more happiness squeezed out by spending your time on things that you want to do. I gladly outsource more and more things as my children get older, as I have less and less opportunity to spend with them, as well as there's just other stuff going on in the world that, well, would I rather be mowing the lawn or would I rather be hiking with friends and family? And what's the cost of that? Can I make it work in my plan and things like that? So time versus money, that's always gonna be a personal decision. I've seen people where it's like money's the most important thing. They're never gonna, they're gonna save every cent and do everything themselves. More power to them. Definitely great for some people. And then I've seen other people outsource everything to their detriment, where they spend so much money on other things that their goals are not really going to be on track for stuff. And so you just really want to be intentional and clear on what's important to you. And then you kind of make the decision of, does it make sense to invest and save some time for yourself so you can spend it doing other things, whether it's working more to earn. That's one kind of big piece of the equation here too, is think about what your time is worth mathematically, because there's a kid down the street that would be super happy at $20 an hour to be doing some yard work. Or for me, $20 an hour is not a lot of money for my time, for about an hour of my time. And same thing's going to be in your situation. However, whatever your average hourly salary would amount to, you can kind of start to weigh things that way too, and be like, oh, I can definitely see it reasonable to spend $20 and save an hour of my time. So there's a few slides here left. And so this is important just because I think obviously everyone's excited to be gearing up and entering tech, and tech is very valuable. I actually added another slide after this one that is more positive things. So want to bring some of the negative things just so that you're aware of them, so that you're not taken by a surprise at some point in your career. I've mentioned $100,000. It's very easy to spend that, even if you've never made anywhere near that. Just by lifestyle creep, all of a sudden you start buying extra clothes, start shopping at Whole Foods, buying organic stuff all the time. Like if you increase enough expense areas that are not typical for where you're at today, you could easily find ways to spend that money, and it might not be to reaching your goals. That's just to live. and so that's important to be aware of. And the more aware of it you are now before these income increases start to occur, the better you will be at being able to navigate and managing that, because I do believe you should enjoy some of the benefits. But if you have a sizable room to start making huge progress or catching up towards goals, I think it's important to consider that strongly as well. I mentioned layoffs at some point in this conversation too. That's one of the things that unfortunately could happen, as it could just happen randomly due to COVID. There was a lot of layoffs. Tech also had a lot of growth too. So we're seeing that this year where like people can't hire people fast enough at this point. But last year there were certain segments of people that were laid off for extended periods of time. That's important to be aware of. There's just natural ebbs and flows where businesses receive a lot of money, and so they have to do something with the money. So they hire a lot of employees. Then they go public, and one of the things that happens when companies have shareholders is they need to make the numbers on the sheets look good, and one way to quickly do that is to do layoffs. And so it's very common in tech, especially older tech companies, where it's just like, hey, we're making the balance sheet look nice, really nice for Q4 of this year by laying off X amount of people, and they're no longer liabilities, and they can bring in cheaper, younger people. Is kind of how they've attacked those things. So be aware, don't be caught off guard if something like that were to happen. Lack of benefits. This is more for startups that are not funded as much as others. Usually tech is really good at providing really awesome benefits, but for those same companies, maybe earlier on in their cycle, early on in their development, they didn't have money for benefits. So it's like, nope. Hopefully you have a spouse or significant other that you can get on their health insurance. Hopefully you can get some of the benefits that way, because we have absolutely nothing. We're gonna shoot this rocket into the sky though, and we're gonna do awesome, and hopefully the benefits will come in the future. So definitely important when you're weighing your employer options to kind of consider, well, do you really need benefits, or can you receive higher income in lieu of some of those benefits? And those things are all negotiation things. I'm sure Collab Lab helps with kind of negotiating and identifying what's good as far as benefit packages. So these are the fun things. So I added this from the last time. So I mentioned a few times, it's life-changing breaking into tech for most people. If there's a huge income jump, if there's a difference as far as instead of working really hard labor and doing things with your hands or things that are not enjoyable. If I've heard like social working is really fulfilling, but it's also really taxing mentally and emotionally. Like there's not always necessarily those types of things in tech where you might be able to get a nice, comfortable thing, good culture, hopefully things that are really nice and comfortable, as opposed to maybe where your career had been before this. High income is definitely there too. So again, entry level might not be the most exciting in some spots, but it doesn't take too long if you kind of prove yourself and constantly investing in yourself, showing that you're capable of mentoring other people, being in management and things like that, which you can do by volunteering after you kind of graduate, get some experience. You can come back and be a mentor for some other collabs that are working along. So high incomes definitely could be life-changing. Employer stock could be life-changing as well. So sometimes it's not valuable. Sometimes it could be like millions of dollars. A lot of times you don't really know that until it actually happens, or a few months before it happens. So, but either way, life-changing nonetheless, if it does actually occur for you. Then the biggest thing is you're more in control of your future than maybe you would have ever been in your previous careers, where there's just a lot of opportunity right now, lots of things going on, and tech just kind of across the board. Like they now are in every single industry. There was a point in time where maybe they weren't in finances, maybe they weren't insurance, but now tech is everywhere. So if there's something you're passionate about, maybe that's not your first job that you land, but maybe that experience you receive, you'll be able to navigate your career to actually be in an area where you're super excited about being in that type of niche or that part of the a particular industry. And so more control here than I'd say most career paths that you can choose. So I think it's important to recognize that all this hard work is going to pay off, and you got to kind of balance these things out and make sure that you have a plan so that you're not kind of caught flat foot when you're starting to receive these larger paychecks. I saw one of my friends I had on my podcast. He said that he now earns 6 months of pay from when he went through like a boot camp and entered tech in 1 month now. So in the past, he was making like $150 a week or something like that. And now he makes 6 months of worth of income in one paycheck. And I believe he gets paid 2 paychecks a month. So you can kind of do the math there. It's pretty significant what's possible. And we can do Q&A now if any questions have come through.
Yeah, thanks for all that, Luke. That's great information. I put the link to the Q&A in the chat. So I think you ought to be able to get in there. I can read them off if that's easier though.
I can pull it up now that I'm not needing to click and being afraid of clicking in advance. Look.
Yeah, I think you can either, if you have a Gmail account or something, you can do that.
I do. I'll give that a try really quick.
Okay.
For some reason, Dory just makes me think of being forgetful. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. But so yeah, we can just tackle this from the top. So Jennifer asks, is purchasing pet insurance for emergencies a good idea? It's definitely makes sense if you know that you definitely would spend any amount of money to provide care for your animal, which most people would every now and then. There's people are like, oh, if it's going to cost money, I'm not necessarily going to do it. We'll just try to figure it out, or home remedies or whatever. And I'm not going to ever tell anyone right or wrong how to go about doing that. But if you get the doctor telling you this is a $10,000 operation and this will make a difference, and you're going to spend that $10,000 regardless, it definitely makes sense to get pet insurance when you know that there's no dollar amount you'd ever set on your pet's kind of medical needs in that situation, for sure. So we have an anonymous one. What finance book will make a significant impact on a person who doesn't have family to rely on and help them prepare for any kinds of emergencies? So that, I wouldn't say there's necessarily like one book to kind of hunt down that's going to solve all those things. A lot of it is going to be mindset, just knowing that, hey, you're on your own, you're not going to have safety nets, and that's most people, honestly. Wealthy individuals with wealthy parents is just a small fraction of most of our backgrounds. And so if you look at anyone being successful, it's because they made sure that they made some of those early steps early on. If you're in the Discord group, I will try to hunt down like maybe 5 books that I can send links to. That would be good ones. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone that's going to like just knock it out of the park and get everything, but I can give you more of a well-rounded kind of selection if I kind of send over 5, and I'll do that one. If someone has accrued significant debt in the process of getting into tech, what should be paid off first? Credit cards, loans for large appliances, cars, student loans. So with that, definitely common, especially with breaking into tech. Sometimes there's those boot camp loans. Sometimes you have to pay a significant portion of your income to boot camps and things like that. So if you're going to prioritize these things, you definitely want to lay them out there as far as, well, what's the balance is, what's the payments, and what's the interest rates. Usually I go by interest rates as far as prioritizing which one to pay off first. There's reasons why you might do something with a smaller balance. If you look into Debt Snowball, and actually I might have a resource on this. I'll hunt down and throw in Discord. So there's the Debt Snowball, and then there's the Debt Avalanche. Debt Avalanche means that you line these things up, and whatever has the highest interest rate, you pay off that first. It might not feel the greatest as you're doing it, but that will save you the most dollars. The Debt Snowball feels better, so it kind of gives you positive reinforcement as you're paying it down, because that one organizes it by the smallest balance. So the one that you'll be able to pay off faster, and it removes it as a line item. You can put a green check mark next to it saying, hey, I paid this off. What's next? What's the next smallest balance? And you really get some momentum and encouragement there for kind of making progress. So those are the 2 most common ways. What I see when people don't necessarily make good advancements on it is they're like, here's money, here's money, here's money, here's money. And they like do a shotgun approach, but then they keep using the credit cards, they keep getting more loans. And so they're not really organized. They're not actually making progress. It definitely doesn't feel like they're making progress, even if they are, because it's small little buckshot holes in these things instead of just focusing on one specific one. You always want to make the minimum payments though. So don't get sent to collections, don't get negative reporting. So make the minimum payments, and then whatever that one you target, apply as much as you can. Again, factoring in the 401k match, and make sure you do the 401k match first. And then that excess amount you can start applying towards that one. What kind of account should I consider putting money away for my child? Not college specific, or at least not limited to that purpose. So this one, there's a wide range. I have my clients doing different things depending on what their goals are. So when we say we don't want it to be college specific, you can contribute to a Roth account. If you have an older child and they're actually working, you can actually create a Roth in their name. If they're not, that's fine. You can fund a Roth in your name. And the biggest difference there is you can take the money out that you make into Roth contributions. You can take that out at any time if they need it beforehand, but then you can also choose to gift money down the line. Then there's just other non-retirement accounts that you can open up for the child and say, hey, I'm putting X amount in, and it could be used for any purpose. It's not tied to retirement. It's not tied towards education. And the biggest thing is just being aware of what the tax situation would look like there. So much of doing well financially feels like it relies on delayed gratification. Are there tricks you recommend for imposing discipline? Don't notice as much when I have money. Yep. So their example even that they use that I was just reading is you might not notice it's not as painful when you're saving if it's taken automatically out of your paycheck. So that's one thing where if you do things automatically, that's going to be the best thing. Your time is very crucial. And so you don't even have to pay anyone to save time on this. It's just automating things. So automate your payments, automate your savings, automate your 401k contributions, and you'll be making progress there even without even having to think about it. So that's one way to do some of these things and make progress. And if you do it right out of the gate, right as you get that nice big income jump as you're changing careers, you're not going to notice it. You're going to see your paycheck and you'll be like, sweet, that's still awesome. So, and other tricks for delayed gratification, start to compare things like, hey, what is important to you? Think of those probably two highest priority goals of yours, and and compare, well, should I get this, what's the exercise thing that everyone's got, the
Peloton or something?
Peloton, yeah. So
Yeah.
not Peloton specific necessarily, but just a good example is, well, Peloton's probably like $1,500. I'm pretty sure I looked at that recently. And so comparing that versus other things that are important to you. And so far I've been able to put it off. I'm like, nope, don't need it yet. Don't need it yet. This other stuff is more important. So think of what's important to you and then compare these major expenses to that. And if those aren't as valuable, well, it does help either delayed gratification, or sometimes just be like, oh, I really don't need that if it's not going to move me closer towards my goals. Concrete example for meaningful goals. So don't make it tied to money. For one, I've had clients be like, oh, I want to have $10 million. Like, that's great. Why do you want that? So the more specific you can get, examples that I see is my clients want to spend $5,000 a year for travel. I have ones that want to pay for college for their children, and we can go and find out what those numbers are, and we can find out how much they need to save to get to those. They might want to save for a down payment on a house. These goals need to be meaningful to you. It doesn't matter if they're meaningful to me. My goals are different than my clients a lot of times. So find out what's important to you, but yeah, definitely brainstorm. You might have people that are like, hey, this is important to me, but it's not important to you. Then just cross off your list, but like, oh, I know that's not important. I don't really need to think about it anymore. What happens is sometimes we're so close in relationships with people and coworkers where all of a sudden we think our goals are their goals because they're excited about it. But that's not really how it works. Our goals aren't our parents' goals. Our goals aren't even necessarily always our spouses or significant other goals. Hopefully you want more of those goals to overlap than not overlap, because it just makes it easier. But yeah, there's going to be some things like starting business was important to me, wasn't important to my wife, but my wife definitely supported me to be able to do something like that. I have a 20-year term insurance that will expire in another 6 years when my kids are in college. Is it worth it for me to purchase another 20-year term now? So if you feel that if something happened to you 10 years from now, so after that 6 year, or after that 6 years and your term insurance expires, if you don't think your net worth is going to be able to support the people that want to at the level that they need, it sounds like your kids would be mid college or just out of college at that point. So if you think that your assets, your home, if you have it, the equity in your home, your 401ks, the other resources you have isn't good enough for that, then definitely purchase another term life insurance. And it doesn't have to be 20 years. It can be 15 years. It can be 10 years, I think is usually the smallest I see. But then you can also decide 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road to cancel it. So that's one of the nice things about life insurance is you can decide at some point like, oh, I actually have enough, don't need this anymore, cancel. and you won't have that coverage anymore, but you also won't have the payment. How do I feel about umbrella policies? Umbrella policies are super important. As your net worth grows, you want to usually round up. So if you have $900,000 in net worth, when you look at all of your resources and houses and things like that, 900,000, well, you round that up to $1 million of umbrella coverage. If you have 1.8 million, you round it up to 2, so on and so forth. Usually they're offered in $1 million increments and super affordable. It's like maybe $300 to a year to have 1 million in coverage to protect you against the things that you're worried about: dog bites, someone sneaking into your backyard, running from the cops or whatever. They get injured on your stuff and they try to sue you. So there's people are sue happy in the United States, at least. So you definitely want to protect your wealth as you grow it. You don't need umbrella coverage if you don't have any assets. You just file bankruptcy and just kind of start over at that point.
I don't actually understand. I don't know what an umbrella policy is. It just like kind of covers random stuff.
So it's liability coverage for things that happen property-wise. If you get in a car accident, someone tries to sue you, you have your basic insurance policies, but those all have like number caps on them as far as your liability. So what umbrella coverage does for high net worth people is it's like, hey, if someone what happens is if you get in a car accident, those people might hire someone, an attorney, a private investigator, to find out, hey, what does Andrew do for a living? Oh, he's in tech. He probably has a lot of money. Let's sue him for X amount because we know he probably has it somewhere. The umbrella coverage helps absorb that cost and kind of impact your net worth, basically.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, it's a sad thing that it needed, but yet for the small cost, it provides a huge benefit for those unfortunate kind of situations. Perfect. And we got, looks like 3 more here with the 401k versus debt repayment example. How does compound interest factor in? Or is it just simpler not to take into account? So the compound interest could play a factor, but with the 401k employer match, 100%, it would take a long time for that 22% to compound. And hopefully the game plan is your incomes would be sufficient enough in the first couple of years, if not the first year of tech, to not only get that above that 3%, or some employers say, hey, you need to put in 6% for us to put in 3%. Hopefully you still have enough above what the employer requires to start tackling some of that high interest debt. But yeah, 100% guaranteed match from the employer versus even like a 22-25%. It would take multiple years for that compounding on the credit and debt side before it overtakes that. And hopefully the investments will help counter any of that compound interest as well. So that's how I'd tackle that. What is an acceptable investment cliff or what's an acceptable investment cliff for stock options? So these are pretty standard. Most of the time it's a 1-year cliff. Then you start vesting either annually or monthly. So maybe it's a 4-year vesting cycle or a 5-year vesting cycle. Usually it's a 1-year cliff. If it's more than,
can you explain what the cliff means?
Yep. So what the cliff means is that you don't earn anything until you get to that cliff, basically. So if there's a 1-year cliff, which is typically what I see in most examples, is if you work there 11 months and then you quit, you don't get any stock options. You never made it to the cliff. If you make it to that cliff, then you get that first percentage. So to keep the math easy, if it's a 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff, after 1 year, you get 25%. Because 1 year of 4 years is 25%. So you get 25% of the stock options awarded to you. And then after there, it depends on how they do it. It's not wrong. It's not even negotiable a lot of times with whether it's monthly after that. So if you get a small percentage every single month after that, or if you have to wait a full year to year 2, then you get another 25%. That could vary. And usually it's not a big enough difference between companies to make a big difference. You probably already set on what company is going to be the best offer for you, regardless of whether they start vesting monthly or quarterly or annually after that initial first year cliff. So, but there's always usually at least a 1-year cliff. I've never seen people get stuff like, oh, you worked here 1 month, you're automatically vested in a chunk of this. So it's pretty common for at least 1 year. If it's more than that, a little bit uncommon. I don't know if I've ever seen it, but I'm sure it's possible.
I'm wondering, like, it's been a year in my experience everywhere that I've worked in. But if somebody, if a company, like say a startup says it's a 2-year cliff or something, is that kind of a red flag? Like maybe they don't like it.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a red flag. It'd be unusual. And again, it's not something I would ever expect for something like that to be negotiable. Usually those things had to be finely worded, very tightly packaged in order for them to meet other kind of rules and regulations in order for those stock options to actually be treated like stock options. So usually they're wound pretty tight as far as, hey, we can do this or that. And I don't think they can typically do anything more other than maybe give you more stock options. So if you're not happy with it, like, well, for having to wait an additional year, why don't you sweeten the offer a little bit? That might be doable, but if for some reason there was like a 2-year cliff, I don't even think it's possible to get them down to a 1-year cliff. You can go to another company that most likely has a 1-year cliff, but that company, I don't think they'd be able to do much of anything. And the last one is linked to my podcast, and now I'll throw that into Discord along with some of these other things here. So link to podcast and perfect. Yep. And you guys, if you want to reach out, connect with me, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, but technically I'm on Facebook too. So any social media, I'm in the Discord group. So, or the Slack, I don't know why I keep calling it Discord.
Slack, yeah. That's all right.
I'm in another Discord group, but not with anyone here. So perfect. I really appreciate this. Sorry for going a little bit over, but I think we killed all of those questions. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah, that was great. That's such good information. And it's so important too. Like, it really is life-changing to get into tech for a lot of people. And that's a big reason why we do what we do. And it can be really tempting to just kind of like spend it all and not really plan for your future. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. And that one of the things that I wrote, and I wouldn't say it's one of my most popular blog posts, but it's like the downside to making the most money you ever had. And it's really, if you're not intentional, right? If you are smart about it out of the gate, it's only upside basically. But there are some downsides, because if you do lock your new lifestyle in at 100,000, well, it's just really tricky to backwalk that, especially if you have a significant other who, that was our biggest struggle, where we're spending like where my income was. I quit my job, started a business, went to zero. And it's like, hey, we had to change some of the things. And it was easy for me to take on because it was my goals. It was what was probably the most important for me. It was more of a struggle for my wife, for my kids to be like, and it was a struggle for me too around like the holidays. Sorry, can't spend that much, because now we do not have that much money right now. So it's really hard to walk back that lifestyle, especially if there's other people in the mix, significant others, children, because then you have to kind of explain to them, well, sorry, got laid off, or sorry, had to take this lower paying job to fill the gap. And we're not making that much right now. So it just gets really hard and tricky if you're relying just for your normal daily life, not even talking about savings or 401k contributions. Like, I need 100,000 just to feel comfortable. And that's not because you're doing some of the right things, saving towards goals and stuff like that.
Right. Thanks so much, Luke.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. And reach out to me however and whenever you guys need to.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good night, everybody.